And then I saw it. It was an ancient leather bag sitting all by itself on a shelf tangled with cobwebs.
Now there's a voice you probably recognise.
The dark brown cowhide was worn and cracked. The brass hardware and locks were blackened with rust.
A name you may well know.
PC Green lifted it up for my inspection, and at the back of the shelf a spider scuttled away as if late for an urgent appointment.
A new focus for author Tony Parsons, who's turned to crime, on the Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, exclusive to WHSmith.
Pull up a comfy chair and settle down for another great book from the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
Well, this is a departure for Tony Parsons, isn't it? He's not written anything like this before, and to the manner born. I mean, he's really, really good at it.
Yes, it's quite a big departure for him because he's known, of course, for his family novels, Man and Boy, and the other novels from the same sort of genre. And now he's switched totally. And I must say I'm not surprised because crime novels and, you know, detection and thrillers are really where it's at these days. But still, it's extremely brave of him to make the attempt, and he's done it incredibly well.
Well, as he tells us in the upcoming interview about it, he actually cashed in his pension to do this. He felt he had to. Although he does maintain some of that family sort of feel to it. I mean, the central character, Max, you know, the detective, has a daughter, Scout, who he lives with, you know, he shares an apartment with. And there's quite a lot of their relations. There's a touch of Man and Boy there between Max and little Scout and their little dog, you know. So there is a family dialogue going on at the heart of it, as well as the crime.
Which actually makes you like the detective, Max
Absolutely,
Wolf,
it makes him believable,
much more. But also it is a very gripping and actually I have to say a very gory story.
Extremely bloody.
This strange serial killer who's waltzing around killing men of a certain age and a certain class.
By slitting their throats. Well, actually virtually decapitating them.
So there's a lot of gore in there. But it's a good story and very strongly written.
I also like the fact that Max, his hero, the cop, he's pretty handy. And of course Tony Parsons is a bit handy. He's a boxer, you know, and he spars regularly. And there's one terrific scene which I do want to talk to him about, where Max takes on 3 thugs and destroys them single-handed, which as a bloke, I quite enjoyed.
You haven't missed any of our shows yet. You just haven't downloaded them. Check out whsmith.co.uk/Richard and Judy.
Well, a serial killer is out there. He's prowling the London streets. He's slitting the throats of the wealthy and the powerful. But do they, in fact, deserve to die? Tony Parsons has, as usual, taken a familiar genre and he's put his own unique twist on it. His hero, Detective Max Wolf, of whom we'll hear a lot more in the coming years, is a terrific guide through this dark labyrinth into which Parsons has cast him and just about everybody else. It's exciting and it's satisfying and it feels very real. And you're here now, Tony. I love your little story, which is in the back of the book, in the extra value that we include with WHSmith, where you say that you were researching Smithfield Market very early one morning. And your hero, Max, lives with his daughter in an apartment above Smithfield. And that's all in your head. And of course, he's not real. But to you, he was so real that you said you looked up at these apartment windows, expecting to see him looking out to give you a wave. So fictional characters to the authors are as real as...
It has to be that real to you. It has to matter that much to you, I think. You know, you have to care that much about them. You have to like them that much. And they have to be that real to you. And because they come from somewhere real, even if a lot of it's invented, it kind of matters to you, you know, and you care about them. You care about them, and you're rooting for them. And I think that readers can tell in a second whether writers care about their characters or not.
Absolutely.
You know, and the books that work, I think, are the ones where that empathy that the writer has, that's transmitted to the reader.
Would you agree with me that, I mean, I hear authors saying that it's lonely writing, you're sitting alone in a garret or whatever, and I don't get it because certainly with fiction, to me, my characters are my friends when I'm writing. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, you don't. I mean, if you're built for it and born for it, then I don't think it is lonely. No. I think if you're a natural storyteller, then I don't think it's lonely. You don't, you don't miss the world because you've got this invented world, and it matters more to you. You know, it's you. I mean, but when I'm deep into a book, you know, I wake up at sort of 3 or 4 in the morning and thinking, again, I can fix things, or just things that are rattling around in your head, and you just invest yourself in it. And so I never felt like, but I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think the life is for everybody, you know, because unless you're alone, you're not really doing it. You know, you can't like go into Hay or, you know, go into Edinburgh. That's not
That's not it.
That's
not it.
around the
Right.
life of a writer. That's not the life of the writer.
Yeah.
And if you enjoy it, I think it's there's a lot of solitude involved, but I think we're privileged to do it.
Very much so. Tell us about the book, though, because what the Murder Bag begins with actually begins sort of with 2 prologues almost. But to begin with the very first one, which actually sets the sort of theme of the book. Will you just sum that up for us? What happens right at the beginning?
Yeah, there's a horrible murder is committed in the distant, not in the distant past. Is it the distant past? People have got mullets. People have got mullets. People look like you too. So it's in the 80s. There's a horrible murder, and we don't really know who the victim is. We don't know who the perpetrators are. We think we do.
It's a gang rape, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and a girl, and that's the inciting incident, as they say in creative writing classes. That's what kicks it all off.
Yeah.
20 years later, someone is punishing the perpetrators of that crime.
And these are posh boys.
They're the. I started thinking about the book in 2010, and there seemed to be a lot of antipathy towards bankers and politicians, more so than at any time in my
Bullingdon
life.
Club and that kind of stuff at Oxford,
the fast-track privileged world. There seemed to be a greater resentment than I could ever remember in my life towards that. Because Woolworths was closing down, and people were saying, well, the women who work in Woolworths haven't done anything wrong. Why are they losing their jobs? And I think you have to tap into that. I think great crime novels, great thrillers. You can't force it, but they've got to be somehow representative of their time. We forget that people like Raymond Chandler were writing contemporary novels.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And there is definitely a zeitgeist, which I think certainly, it's different if you're writing a historical novel or something like that, but if you're writing something set at the moment, you do have to tap into themes which actually resonate in people's heads.
But also, what I think is great about that prologue, with the prologue you just described, is that certainly as a reader, as a bloke reading it, you just feel so outraged on behalf of this poor girl, what she goes through in those opening 4 or 5 pages, the way she tries to fight back, the way she almost gets away, and the way she's dragged back to a terrible death. And you just want revenge. That's which is what the book's really about.
Yeah, it is about revenge, and it is about, we don't think enough about the victims. We don't think enough about what's taken away from them. Not just in that moment, but their future too. What's taken away. We don't care about that enough as a society, or maybe the average person does, but that's not reflected in the political and legal system. So you need to there's a quote from George Orwell at the front. He wrote a very famous essay, The Decline of the English Murder, and Orwell said that crimes as serious as murder should have strong emotions behind them. And I think that it's too much. There can be too much of like a Cluedo type game about crime fiction. That there's real consequences, there's real tragedy, and lives being torn apart. So I wanted to kind of try and it's my first go, So I wanted to try and represent that.
I was going to ask you about this because obviously you're a prolific author. You've written loads of books before, very, very successful books. But your books about the family, if you like, starting with Man and Boy, have been hugely successful. So this switch into crime, detective thriller is quite sort of sudden for you. Is it something you've been thinking about for a while?
Yeah, I cashed in my pension to do it. I mean, I sat down with my wife when I decided that this was the book that I wanted to do, and said, I've got to prove that I can do it. I've got to write the book without a contract. There's no one's going to believe that I can do it. And you can't publish a book grudgingly. Maybe the old publishers of Man and Boy, maybe they would have said, indulge him. And I know it couldn't be done like that. I had to start again. So I talked about it with my wife Eureka and said, I'm going to have to fund it myself. It means cashing in the pension, and you can only spend your pension once.
Well, you were born to it, Tony. It reads like a very seasoned writer of this kind of crime fiction. And as I said in the introduction, we're going to see more of him. This is the first appearance of Max Wolfe. Judy mentions the family connection, but of course he has a daughter who's looking after, because he's a widower. Scout.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of their relationship in the book. So there is a kind of a man and boy sort of theme bubbling through it. But as I said, it's the first of a trilogy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you started the second and third yet?
I was thinking about it for a year or two, then it took a couple of years to write, but we sold it in 24 hours.
Hey.
But they were very clear that they wanted 3 books about Max Wolfe, Max and Scout.
Yeah.
They wanted 3 of those in 3 years.
Tell us about Max. Let's give us a quick thumbnail profile.
He's a young He's a young detective. He's transferred to Homicide and Serious Crime Command at the start of the book. He's in his 20s, and his marriage has collapsed. He finds that he's a single parent, and I think nobody plans to be a single parent, whether you're a man or a woman. Nobody plans it. Nobody expects it's going to happen to them, and it does. And he's still working out, but he's got his, his deep and profound love for Scout. And that's what gets you through. That's what gets you through as a parent, as a single parent, or you're a nuclear family. What gets you through is that love that you've got and the bond that you've got with the child. And I wanted to give him. I'm a big fan of the Man Alone thrillers. I love James Bond and Jack Reacher. I love them, but I wanted to do it in my own way, and I wanted to have a bit of emotional ballast in his life, so that he's got. I didn't want him to be a domestic creature, but at the same time I wanted him to be a family man, and he
can handle himself. I mean, there's a great scene. I don't think there's anything away here. It's a great scene because he can box, as you can. I mean, you're a boxer. There's a fabulous scene where he's 3-on-1 some very serious muscle he's got to take on. He handles it perfectly by a straight twisting punch. Tautology, by a straight punch to the guy's chest. And you actually then describe, as a boxer, you can't understand why more people don't throw punches to the chest, because it's a heart stopper.
Right? No, he only punches one of them, but that's all he has to punch. Yeah, he punches him in the heart, and it stops him and just rocks him back, because they're making fun of his dog, and he explains to them, and he's got a very very small dog, and a little Cavalier King Charles Spaniel called Stan, and he says, he's not the one who bites.
It's a great scene.
So it's, I thought, I think it's a book for dog lovers too.
I have to say that the ending is very, very satisfying, and you pray for that when you invest, when you're reading a book. Obviously, we're reading this professionally, but then it became a great personal pleasure. But you really want it to end well, and it does. And I note from the comments in the back that you knew what the ending was going to be almost before you started writing.
Yeah, I'd like to have that template. I'd like to have that, to know where I'm going, to have an idea of the book in my head, because it takes such a long time to write a book.
Yeah.
It takes such a long time to write a book that there's plenty of time to improvise within that. Template, it's like driving to Glasgow from London. There's plenty of time to stop off and look at the Lake District. So I like to have that idea of where I was going, and I just had a sense of the story that I wanted to tell. That I wanted to tell a crime story, a thriller with heart. With that kind of emotional impact.
Well, I think it's great, and I love that kind of. I love the fact that you've introduced that family element. It makes, as a woman reading it, certainly, it makes you feel immediately much more receptive to Max, and much more interested in him as a man, as opposed to just an avenging detective.
And I think when you read this book, The Murder Bag by Tony Parsons here, you'll think you'll know how it's going to finish. I promise you, you will not. It's a fantastic ending. So there it is, available, as they say, in all good bookshops, but in particular in WHSmith, who we're in partnership with. And what you get special, if you get it from there, is you get all this extra content in the back, including a fascinating Q&A that we've done with Tony in print. And he's really interesting about the whole writing process, and goes into more detail there about his thoughts about the whole thing. Anyway, it's a fabulous read, and I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, mate.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. I write 7 days a week. I work every day of the week, and I try to start as early in the day as possible. I walk my dog, Stan, for an hour, and then I take my daughter to school. Then I have breakfast, and then I begin. And my routine is really that I try to write 1,000 words every day. And you don't always write 1,000 words every day. Sometimes before you begin a book and when you're ending it, there's a lot of brooding, there's a lot of dreaming, there's a lot of staring into space and thinking about it. But when writing every book is like running a marathon, and you have to keep a steady pace. And every writer's got their own pace, and mine is 1,000 words a day, 1,000 good words that I can use. Not everything that we love can we be good at. I mean, I loved when I was a boy was football, playing football, and reading and writing. They were the two things. They were my two great loves, And I had a trial with Chelsea when I was 15, and I knew from the moment that we kicked off in this trial that I wasn't good enough. I just wasn't good enough. I just wasn't fast enough. Wasn't skillful enough. I just didn't have anything that I needed, and everybody was better than me, and they didn't make it either. They didn't become professionals either. Everything that I had was riding on being a writer. And I mean, the great thing about being a writer is that nobody can stop you doing it. Nobody can say you can't do it. It's not like being a professional footballer. It's not like being, an airline pilot or a rock star. You can do it as long as you accept that if you can't do it successfully, then you'll do it unsuccessfully. But nobody can stop you. That's the glory of it, the glory of the blank page that you fill with your stories, that there's nobody in the world that can stop you doing it apart from yourself.
For the Richard and Judy Book Club, I have read Rachel Joyce's The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. What a wonderful book. I really, really enjoyed this. Slightly slow to start, and I thought, I'm not sure where this is going to go. But it is a fantastic example of taking the ordinary, the mundane even, and writing a story that is lyrical and touching and makes you re-evaluate the ordinariness of life.
From the Richard and Judy Book Club, I must admit, I do wait every week to try and find something that's maybe out of my genre, but I do have a passion for thrillers in particular, and the ones that stood out for me over the past couple of years that have been highly recommended, and rightly, are Apple Tree Yard, a Louise Doherty, which was just amazing, and the twists in that book were incredible. And in the same thing as well, David Mark with his debut novel Dark Winter was great. That got me through a dark winter, literally.
So Harold Fry, he's a retired man. He's just plodding along, and then something happens and he suddenly has a purpose. He has a mission to fulfill. And the way he's going to do this is by walking, which that's not an extraordinary thing to do. And it's the very ordinariness of it that makes it so charming, because you can picture yourself in this situation. But the really life-affirming thing about this book is that by the end of it, everybody's sort of reappraised the way they think about each other. I sat for 2.5 hours in a cold bath, sobbing as I read the end of this book. I couldn't get out. My husband kept knocking on the door saying, "What's she doing?" And I just couldn't. I thought, well, I can't get out now until I've finished this book.
Thanks for giving us all your thoughts. Do keep telling us what you think about the titles that we choose. Keep them coming in, because we really love to know what you actually think.
Now I'm giving you plenty of notice to get your hankies ready for the 5th book in this current collection.
If you would just lay your hands on her, we could have you in and out in a jiffy.
The Last Days of Rabbit Hayes.
So you're planning on smuggling me into her house in the middle of the night? He asked, one bushy silver eyebrow raised. No, she sleeps a lot, it's the medication, and she's in a hospice, Molly said. The words sounded strange coming out of her mouth. Michael Galler took her hand. Stage 4, yes. I'm so sorry, Molly. Don't be, just help us. She detected the panic in her voice. I can't. Why? She pleaded. She's dying, Molly.
And Anna McPartlin will actually give you plenty of laughs as well if you join us for the next podcast, so we hope to have you with us then.
Whatever the book, wherever you read, carry our reviews with you. Download the Richard and Judy Book Club and be part of the debate on Twitter and Facebook.